do travel a lot. For a while I was actually homeless and literally lived out of a suitcase. So she is right about that. I'm going to talk to you today about estimating traffic based on keyword research. So before we get into that, we need to kind of set the stage. Who are you doing this for? What you need to be thinking about and why it's important. And so I tend to think about who are the people that we've got to address. So we've got in every organization a few different kinds of people. We've got, this analytical guy here on the right. He's the grump, right? We all know that guy. We all know the one that's going to criticize everything and look for holes. So you've got to make sure you think about him and provide very thorough information, educate him on how you came to some of your conclusions. The second we've got, these might be the developers, they might be product managers. They're going to be these guys that are calculating, we could do this SEO thing, or we could do this thing over here that generates millions of dollars, and I know exactly what I'm going to get out of it, right? So you've got to think about these guys, because they're always thinking about how can we get more done. Maybe they're also thinking about how we can get things done cheaper, right? And SEO is not usually the cheap option. And then the last are the executives, right? So what do the executives need to think about? And so they're always trying to get more done with less cost, right? The best ROI. So it's really important for you guys as SEOs to really think about, well, how do I really calculate all of this and think about the agendas of these different people? The challenge that we see with a lot of SEO keyword research is that there's this challenge to make the leap from the keyword traffic that comes from the tools into actual revenue and what I'm going to get in terms of revenue and profit, so turning it into dollars. And so what we want to think about is, well, you know what, that's what management needs. All these guys need the stuff on the right. So this presentation is going to help you by filling that gap so that you don't get cut. Because these guys here, that goes back. Yeah, these guys here, they're focused on what can we cut, right? They're often the ones that will decide whether or not your stuff stays in scope. So today's presentation, we're actually going to fill that gap by determining, well, what's that estimated traffic? How do we actually predict what kind of traffic are we actually going to get for a given keyword? So that we can then take it to the next level and say, okay, right, if I get this kind of traffic, now I can do revenue and profit. So we're going to focus on the estimating of traffic. So we've got a lot of hurdles to cross today, right? So in today's world, keywords have changed, the search results have changed quite a bit. So they're not all equal. Right? So not all the search results pages are the same. Not every listing is going to be as valuable as other listings. And so we've got like author photos, review stars, numbers of reviews. Things like even recipes have how long does it take to prepare. So there's a lot of data points that are actually competing against your listing that may not have all of those elements. Another thing we have to think about is they're not as useful, these ranking predictions, as they used to be, right? Because the ranking predictions used to be all for search results pages that are identical, but the problem is they're not identical for every user anymore. So we've got these personalized results, and then what's happening in Los Angeles is going to be different versus New York. Also, my history, what I tend to click on, all of these things start to impact. So you have to take that stuff into account. Everyone is looking for this, magic box. How do I do it? A tool. I genuinely think a tool can be created, and I'm kind of surprised I haven't really seen one yet on how to do this and guide someone for this. But to be honest, it's going to feel a little bit like this, right? Like you're looking into a glass ball, right? So I hear some giggles. It sounds like, yeah, that's kind of what it sometimes feels like. So I'm going to walk you through a process for this. So my life before I was an SEO, I did user experience and project management, but I also had the role of process analyst. So I know that sounds super cool to people like us, but my job was to actually systematize things. So when I thought about how am I going to present this stuff, I actually said, okay, right, this needs to be a process, something that you can take away, download the slides, take it away, and execute it on it. How many of you guys are in-house SEOs? Okay, you guys don't do this day to day, right? So the consultants in the room, So it looks like maybe a good 40% at least were in-housers. So the consultants in the room are going to do this stuff quite often with clients. But I know when I work with in-house SEOs, they do this maybe once or twice a year, or maybe when they're going to launch a new section or launch a new business line or product line, it'll come up a little bit more frequently. But it's so infrequent that this is going to be very unfamiliar territory. So this is a process that you can kind of repeat and follow along. So we made a couple of assumptions. I made the assumption that you already know advanced keyword research. So we are not going to talk about how to gather keywords using tools. I'm assuming you know how to do that. We're not going to talk about, how do I weigh the demand versus competition. I'm going to make an assumption that you've thought about your personas, who you're going to target, what are the keywords that they want. I'm going to assume you've mapped your keywords to the buying cycle and to the pages that you're targeting, right? All of that stuff's done. We're taking it after all of these things happen. I'm also assuming your keyword research is complete. I want you to think about this not as the perfect solution, because you're going to find some holes in it, most likely. No model is going to be perfect. And it's not perfect. It's one model. You may need to adjust. So sometimes we get into this and we actually realize, well, for this client and the data we're seeing, my intuition says it's wrong. And so we'll make some manual adjustments to the model. So be thinking about that if you have to use this. And then this is just kind of a subset of the things that we train in-house SEOs. I only had 20 minutes about to give the presentation, so I couldn't do everything. So we kind of simplified this down into something that you could walk away with a process to follow. So before you begin, you need to know your site's weaknesses, the competitiveness in your market, your current traffic levels, and all of that's going to lead to where you think you can rank. So I am making an assumption that you can figure out by looking at all of your data that I know where I'm going to rank, so that I can figure out what my click-through data rate might be. And I'm also going to assume that you know your keyword volume. So the overview of the process, so let's just walk through it. The first thing we've got to do is predict the actual search volume for any keyword, right? We're getting the volume from tools, and the tools are not always right. We know that. So we've got to figure out, well, how do we predict the actual volume for a keyword? Then we need to predict, well, what's our average ranking? So we have to actually think about, well, what do I think I could actually rank for? If position number 1 is Wikipedia, number 2 is Amazon, and number 3 is the New York Times, I'm not likely to take positions 1 through 3. So that number shouldn't even be something I account for in my calculation for predicting my traffic lift, right? Okay, so then once I know my average ranking position, then I'm going to predict, well, what's my click-through rate, right? And there are a few studies that have been done on that. You can use your Google or Bing webmaster data on this, right? So there are lots of things that you can do, and I'll talk about how you bring all of those things into the picture. And from all of these things, we can then estimate our lift. The problem is we have these first 3 hurdles to overcome. So as I talked about, if you do it infrequently, it's always going to be a challenge. This will just kind of walk you through it. So what we've done is we have a spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet walks you through the process. So this is part 1. Do I have a pointer? No. Okay, so this is part 1 right here, the average search volume. So that's step 1 that we're going to go through. These 3 columns are step 2, where you're expecting to rank. And then step 3 is your estimated click-through rate, right? So let's walk through all of these steps. So we're going to use a sample keyword, and we're going to use the keyword home insurance calculator, right? So let's go through how we predict the actual search volume. So the first thing you want to do is get your volume from the tools. So I'm going to make an assumption that you know how to go get the volume from Google, AdWords. You need to go into the Bing webmaster tools. For those of you who aren't familiar, they made some updates, and their keyword research tool is in the actual webmaster tools. You probably actually at this step don't even need to do this, because it should be in your spreadsheet from where you did your keyword research to select the keywords. But if you're cutting some corners, that's where you need to go get it. The thing about this data is that it's interesting. We have to think about the search engine's traffic share. So we'll actually are recommending you go get both Google and Bing data, not just one. And I'll talk to you about why. if we look at the market share here, we have Bing representing 15.6% and Google at 6.8%. So then if we use that data, so we've got the monthly average search volume from Google and Bing for our targeted keyword. We have, here's their search volume. So we know, okay, this is the search volume. Then we can say, all right, based on the search volume, we can say they represent 66%. This is 4,800 is what we would estimate to be the total search volume if we base it on Google's data. If we base the total world search volume, or US search volume, based on Bing data, we take the 237, account for the fact that they're only 15% of the market share. We would say, you know what? Bing would tell us that there's about 1,500 searches, right? So there's a huge disparity. So what we actually do is say, you know what? Let's just adjust by taking an average of the two. And so that's how we'll account for that. So we're just going to take an average of the two. In your world, your intuition, your experience may actually say, you know what, these tools over-report or under-report in our particular market. You might not want to do an average. You may want to do something else. But this is one way that you can actually just kind of figure out, what can I do to come up with a search volume that's in between these two numbers. All right, so then you're going to adjust for searcher intent. So here's the problem with the search results. There are multiple searcher intents that the search engines account for in any given thing. So in this example here, we're saying install Windows, okay? When you think about install Windows, some of you might be thinking about the Windows at your home. Others of you are thinking about Microsoft Windows. Well, you know what? The search results account for that as well, right? So they have some of them representing home renovations and some of them representing software. So when we think about this, we have to account for it in our calculation, because you know what? We're actually going to get fewer clicks as a result. We also don't want to account for that portion of the searches that are being conducted for software. So let's say we sell Windows. So we are a company who maybe sells Windows. We don't want to estimate our lift based on the amount of people who are actually looking for Microsoft Windows software. Okay, so let's look at another example. In this example, we're looking at something for our insurance, right? So in this example, we're looking at some of them are transactional in nature, some of the search results, and some of them are more informational in nature. Well, if your search results account for informational searches, that means the search engine thought that some people typing that keyword are not interested in a transaction. They're also interested in a little bit of some information. Those tend to be the best results, is what they're saying. So what we're doing is we're actually going to use that information in the search results to do some back-of-the-napkin calculations. So we're going to say, okay, here's the search volume. I'm going to guesstimate that, you know what? If the search engine listed 8 of the listings as being relevant to my searcher intent, then 80% of those searches are probably going to be a good match. So here's an example. If we say 8 out of the 10 pages are transactional, let's assume that 80% of the search volume is transactional in nature. If 5 of the 10 pages is relevant to your searcher intent, then you're going to assume 50% of the traffic will be what you're looking for, what your searcher would be looking for. So that's how we kind of estimate, okay, here's the total search volume, but this is the percent of that total that's actually interested in what I'm potentially selling. So we want to make sure we're accounting for that. So then in that spreadsheet, what you'll do is you'll add this information. So there's a column where you put the search volume. There's a column where you put Bing's volume. Then we have things that are automatically calculated based on that. So it will actually calculate those estimates and the average that we talked about. It'll do this automatically. And then we'll adjust. So this is where we say, you know what? We think 80% of this page is going to be relevant. 80% of the search results page is relevant. So I'm going to assume 80% of the searches must be relevant to my searcher intent. So that's where you make the adjustment. So the second step, so the second part, now that I know what my potential market is, I've estimated my traffic lift. Now we need to predict the ranking position. And so how might you do that? I mean, you really have not a lot of data to use. This is probably a step that follows a lot more intuition and experience rather than hardcore data. So this is the fuzzy part that when you're talking to executives and stuff like that, you want to make sure you communicate how you came to the conclusion for this one, right? So I tended to think about if big brands were listed, because we're a smaller organization, if a big brand was listed, we dropped our ranking a bit. We're probably not going to outrank some of these big guys. So things that you can do is go to SEO Moz. They've got a great keyword difficulty score, so oftentimes we'll look at this. And so we'll actually come in and look at the data. How difficult is it to rank? Well, let's look at the domain authority and the page authority of the position ranking. And then we've also got some of these detailed pieces of information lower on the page. And so we can do this and say, based on that, I can make an assumption. I can see who's ranking for that keyword. And then I can see, I think I can beat this guy. I don't think I can beat this guy. I think I can beat this guy. I think I can beat this guy. So that's how you can actually go in and figure out, okay, here's where I think we can rank. And so what you want to do is define a high position and a low position. This is how you're going to get your gap. I think we can attract this much traffic to this much traffic by understanding where you think you can rank. Now, you then enter that in your spreadsheet. So you actually just put a column for low and high ranking. And now you're ready for part 3. So now we know our estimated traffic, the estimated search volume relevant to our searcher intent. We now know of these keywords, here's where I think that we can actually rank. So now it's time to predict our click-through rates. So the best data is your own data. Now the challenge with this is that your own data is only going to be relevant for the keywords that you actually have decent rankings for. So it's really not a great source for the vast majority of your keywords. But you can go get your own data through the Google click-through data and the Bing click-through data in the Webmaster Tools. It's not going to help you with the keywords that you're still targeting. So you're still kind of stuck. You've got to figure this out. So this is just an example in Google Webmaster Tools where you want to actually get the click-through data for a given keyword. So the alternative is to look at prior click-through rate studies. So I think two fairly recent, although one of them is a couple years old now, sources are the Optify study and then also the Slingshot study. So you might want to choose one or the other that you find most relevant. We tend to actually prefer the Slingshot data. One, it's a little more recent, and it recognizes that not all searches are going to lead to a click. It took a little bit more into account about what the search results really look like today. So we take that data. Now the downside of thinking about only that data is that it's still not going to count for the things that throw your click-through rate off, such as you have a lot of videos showing up, or you have a couple of leading authorities showing up that would actually cause for a given keyword your click-through to decline. So what you want to do is go ahead and take the data, the set of click-through rates that you chose, whether it's Optify, Slingshot, or something else, and you want to actually just enter that in the spreadsheet. And then we actually account for, if I want to adjust that for a given keyword, I can just enter it in each cell underneath. I would say, you know what? I know based on what I can see in the search results, if I rank there, I'm going to have a lower click-through rate. So let's just bring it down. So you can actually bring it down. So if you do that, you can then word by word account for this. And you don't need to do it for everything, right? This is definitely not something easy to scale. But for some keywords, your intuition, such as certain keywords that tend to have a big brand showing up, you just know those keywords I need to do a little bit more, give a little more manual attention. But all the others, you just go with the Slingshot click-through data. Now it's time to calculate the lift. So we've gathered a lot of information, and the spreadsheet kind of facilitates that, right? So you want to make sure you log it. You've got all the columns that you can put in there. So you log all of this data. And so what you want to do is actually use all of the data in the orange. So we're taking into account the average search volume. we're taking into account an adjustment for the matching of search, right? So it's an estimate. What percentage of searches do I think are going to have the same intent that I can deliver on? Then we're looking at, well, what do you think is your high ranking versus your low ranking? And we're taking into account all the click-through rate data. And based on that, the spreadsheet can automatically calculate your estimated traffic lift, right? So we can say, here's my range. So for homeowners insurance calculator, it can be between 87 and 316. Right? So you can use this spreadsheet to kind of drive what kind of metrics you want to communicate out to the organization. Now, I've done this quite a bit, and I was an in-house SEO, and so I really remember what it was like to communicate the data, and I had some war stories, right? And so people who've heard me speak, I often talk about my war stories back when I was figuring it out. And so what we want to do is think about remembering these guys, right? So you've got to remember the guys that are really there to pick you apart, especially if you're not a data person. I know this event seems to have attracted a lot of data presentations, so you guys are loving it who are data people. But those who are not data people, this is especially important for you. So when we think about that, those guys want to cut. So you need to make sure you back up everything. You really present right. So emphasize it's not easy to calculate this and estimate, explain how you came to these estimates. So what you want to do is walk them through, here's the process, here's how I came to these conclusions, and let them understand and build trust with your approach, your model, your calculation model, right? I really recommend you use a range, not a finite number. That tends to show that there's a gap. If you don't do things right, you're going to actually get the lower number or potentially less, right? So as much as you can, use a gap. Identify what needs to happen to achieve the metric. And this is where I think a lot of SEOs I see when I look at in-house programs, they kind of miss the mark because they're not specifying clearly enough for everyone to understand that if you don't do this, you're not going to get this. And so they might talk about it, but it's kind of glossed over and it's not spelled out in crystal clear fashion. So you want to make sure that you're really talking about, we need to launch 5 articles or blog posts per month. We need to hire a copywriter, and that copywriter needs to produce something every single day. Whatever it is, you need to make some assumptions on what's going to happen to achieve that metric. That's also, it's not just for a little bit of CYA, but it's also for them to understand what do I need to account for in the budget. So that's why that's going to be really important. I also recommend you identify all risks that could hinder the traffic goals. So you want to make sure you think about URL strategy is not being search friendly, the CMS is not going to be upgraded. Anything that can go wrong that will cause you not to achieve your results, you want to talk about that. This is especially important if there's something that you're trying to get through the system and you know that if you get that through you would achieve this. You want to make sure executives truly understand this. And then you want to make sure you're adding dollars to the presentation. So now that you know, here's what I think my traffic should be for any given keyword, you can then easily take that leap into revenue, right? You might be able to use some pay-per-click data to drive some of that decisions. You might be able to use historical data to drive some of that calculations as well. And then also you want to say, you know what, for us to get this kind of traffic through other channels, this is what it would cost. So then you're giving a comparison of, yeah, I know I'm asking for this, 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 and this, but here's what's on the table. And for us to get that same amount of traffic, this is what it would cost through other means. So that will actually help you with getting SEO prioritized. And that's all we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome.
I see hands up already. Start right here.
Yep.
Hi. I just wanted to ask if you could make that Excel spreadsheet available to us because it's a really nice base.
I can. It's not posted online, but if you email presentations@seoinhouse.com, that goes to my assistant, and I will tell her to give it out. I didn't think there was 1,000 people here, so she doesn't know that.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, but we can give that out to you guys, just presentations@seoinhouse.com, or you could just drop a card, whatever. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for that. That was really useful. I'll be trying that when I get back. Do you ever factor in long tail onto this?
Yeah, sometimes we use a little bit of a different approach for long tail, but I think you could still do this. So take in all the search volume for the long tail. Sometimes we start just querying, okay, what kind of words contain this theme, or what kind of words contain that theme? But it's not as systematic. It's a little rough how we do it. But I really felt like you could probably take your long tail keywords that you've identified in keyword research and throw it in here and get the same kind of results.
So what about like, so say you create a new page, you're targeting a head term. It's not just going to be that head term that comes.
Yeah.
There's going to be some stuff, and there's going to be stuff that you're not going to be able to get search volume for necessarily out of the tools that are available. Do you have like, do you say add 8% for that extreme long tail, or do you just?
I'm sorry, repeat the question again?
So say you create a new page for a new product or whatever, it's not just going to be head terms, and it's not necessarily just going to be terms that have a search volume that you can find through the tools that are available. Do you just say, well, look, 8% or however many are going to be like really random long tail stuff, or do you just not factor that in?
So I think that that's a little less about the model and more about thinking about what kind of keywords could it actually rank for. So I would be taking a look at first, what do I think the combinations could be based on the content of the page, right? So it sounds like you're trying to predict before we know what's on the page. So you're like early in if we think about the time it takes from idea and prioritization to launch, you're up here trying to do the calculations, but the content is written here. And so the challenge with that is you need to know what's going in the content to truly predict this, unless you as the SEO control the content. So if that's the case, if you don't control the content, I would wait until content is done. But you might be able to say, my goal is it ranks for these 20 words or these 40 words. Yeah.
Hello. That was excellent, Jessica. Really. Oh,
Where are we?
I'm right here.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Thanks. That was excellent, and it does seem, though, that in order to show incremental changes, that you would need to subtract out the current traffic that they have.
That is a very good point.
So let's say they're number 10, and without doing anything, they're getting a certain amount of traffic at number 10, and then you're saying you're going to go between 5 and 8. If they hit 8,
Yep.
it's only that incremental, so you'd have to subtract out, correct?
Yeah, so that's a good point where I said this is a subset of what we do, like it's not the full process. But what I can do is we'll add that subtraction. Oh, my wheel got stuck in between the two. We'll add that subtraction into the spreadsheet, and then we'll send it out if anybody, again, if you guys want it, you can leave your card or send us an email.
Right over here, you left. There you go. Hi. I'm curious about accuracy rates. So have you compared this data, say, to either the AdWords results or the Bing results after you've calculated your numbers, and then again to the actual traffic that was driven after you got those results?
Usually, so the difference between us and an agency, to be very honest, is that we're usually not involved at that point. So we get brought in to do a lot of the strategy and that sort of thing. So since we have come up with that, I have not done that. But what we have done is compared this data with the pay-per-click data in the preparation of the strategy. And so what we'll do is, remember I said sometimes the model has to be adjusted. You use a little bit of intuition sometimes, like in my market, this doesn't seem to show correct. I talked about that. That's where you'll just start adjusting. So I might have started with the slingshot data at the top, but my data indicates that it's going to be different. So then you'll just kind of bring it down. 'Cause sometimes you look at this data and your intuition just says it's wrong.
Have you done anything with local prediction at all? How local have you been able to get? Obviously, you can't track personalized results and give an estimate on personalized, but local might be possible. Just
Like by
curious.
city and state?
Correct, yeah, and region.
Yep, no, we haven't done this to that granularity, but I would think if you can narrow the search volume data by that, you should be okay because you're reducing the volume significantly. So like for example, in the Google AdWords tool, you can actually specify state or region. So that'll shrink the actual search volume number down to represent local.
All right,